When drawing anything in perspective, there's always at least one vanishing point where perspective lines meet. Except when your field of view is isometric. Then your guides for perspective will never meet at one point. PROCREATE has this grid that says isometric on it, but isometric doesn't just have to be this one angle. Honestly, I think this grid is a bit limiting, so I decided not to use it at all for this illustration. What I want to have in this drawing is enough elements that tell a story of this witch who is taking care of her plants and what kind of life she is living. I want all of those details to come through these details. When I was a kid, I used to love storybook illustrations where you could see these big cutouts of houses or castles. Actually, I still love all of that stuff. I don't know why I said as a kid. I just thought maybe I could make one of these illustrations for myself now. For some reason, this whole idea seemed really intimidating. Maybe it's because there are so many elements that need to somehow come together in the end. In this beginning phase, I kept telling myself these small lies that I only need to do this one part of this whole process right now and not worry about the final result yet. That kind of worked. In this video I showed my process for elements that I block in using SketchUp, and for this drawing I did a quick 60-minute live stream to block in this house with simple boxes. The most useful thing about this is getting a rough guide for the direction of the shadows too. This will be something that I'll use later in the process, and I'm gonna show that. I started with the characters. I initially thought that this bear also lives in this building, but as the drawing kept progressing, I thought it would be more interesting if he's just the kind of friend who almost always hangs around your house, so much so that he's almost part of the furniture. But why the bear is in the house all the time and what their friendship is like, that is something that I felt really intrigued by, so I decided to explore that in the details themselves. The details themselves can be crushingly overwhelming to work on if you're not careful about how you spend that time. For me, the main shortcuts that I used in this process, besides that 3D block-in, is not drawing areas that would be much faster to do digitally. For example, on the upper platform of this house, I want to add a detailed floor tile pattern to give these two areas of floor more visual separation. Because the floor tiles are also in isometric perspective, I decided to draw them in PROCREATE instead of using pencil. Isometric perspective is really handy for copying elements, because no matter where you place the copy, the size will be exactly the same. This is also why isometric perspective is used in so many 2D games, because you can easily recycle the same assets. Now, if someone out there wants to spend a day measuring and doing elements like these by hand, then by all means, don't let me stop you. You do you. I also didn't put anything in those paintings. They are just empty frames, because I thought that stuff would be way more fun for me to figure out just by painting on the paintings. Anyway, maybe it's just me, but I want to keep things for me to design through the entire process. When everything is just 100% planned and figured out when I start painting, I found that it's much harder for me to care about what I'm doing, so there needs to be some decisions for me throughout the entire process. Here I brought in my shadows from SketchUp block-in, and because it's the exact same angle, they mostly fit with my line art. But the block-in is so rough that I go by hand and then adjust the shadows to match all of these like small props and objects that I drew in the line art phase, because none of these props are actually modeled in 3D. I only had the basic shape for the room, and then I'm adjusting these shadows to kind of highlight these objects and their three-dimensionality a bit more. This layer that has the shadows on it, it is set to multiply blend mode, and I kept it separate for the entire color block-in phase so that I could kind of adjust the colors and still have that information from the shadows. But in the end, I want to drop this shadow layer on top of everything so that I can work on the whole color palette without worrying about blend modes, because that workflow gets really messy in the long run, especially in a complex piece like this. For this painting, I used my new brush called Cotton Candy. Thank you for the lovely people on Instagram who named this brush, by the way. This name was suggested by several people, and I sent all of them the brush to download. It's also available for my members until 12th of November. Usually I want to give the impression that brushes don't matter, but honestly I was just so excited about the way that this brush turned out, and I made it specifically for pieces like this where I needed really hard opaque edges, but also these big watercolor textured big washes. For someone like me who enjoys just messing with colors, this definitely helped me get through this big project, because there were so many situations where I would just accidentally make these big marks that I liked and decided to leave them in. Even in smaller details, I didn't want the painting style to be too fuzzy, so sometimes when I left in spaces of paper texture between objects, I didn't go back in to fix those areas, because I don't know, there's just something carefree that I like about that look. It feels more like a storybook to me this way somehow. By the way, I was totally right about these paintings. It was so much fun doing these like tiny doodle paintings within this painting, and I don't know why anybody would have paintings like these on their walls, but it was just a really nice little break from designing all the other elements in this piece. These images are kind of like their own contained things, and it is also one way to kind of show the personality of this witch that is living in this space. She wants to have this huge portrait of a black bunny on her wall for some reason, and I think that tells us something about what kind of a person she is. After I drew in the characters, I started filling in the space from top left corner. This is simply to avoid smearing my pencil lines with my hand as I'm working. After placing the bed there, I added some of her clothes around the bed. Once I figured out that one of her socks has fallen from this area, the rest of the story kind of came together from that small detail. This girl is still studying to be a witch, and she's a bit of a scatterbrain. All of the rest of the items in her home are misplaced in the same way. She might look up details from the books and leave them where she last used them. She's focusing her studies on potions, and that's why her home is filled with plants. We can even see them on her balcony through that window. They're ingredients for various magical mixtures. Her friend, that bear, is a great cook, and whenever he comes around, he brings lunch for them both. This is also why the kitchen area is oddly the cleanest part of her entire home. There are so many books on how to use the plants. A big part of them also have just great cooking recipes, and that's why the bear likes to hang around and browse through her collection. This cauldron that needs to be moved towards the stove sometimes, when a potion needs, for example, a lot of heated elements, it's a bit too heavy for her to move around on her own, so I placed a crumpled carpet there. It's not ideal, but it can help moving it around. There's also a burn mark on that floor. That's a result of an accident that happened while moving that cauldron. By the way, this is in no way important to the story, but I felt like it was really important to draw this small rat underneath the building. I don't know why, but I ended up redrawing it like 3 times because I just wanted to give it all of my love and care. For some reason, I felt like it's really important to have a white rat here. If you want to do an isometric illustration, it's technically at the same time one of the easiest types of perspective to draw, because your lines to align elements in perspective are always at the exact same angle, no matter where you place that element. But it's kind of a double-edged sword. The challenging part is drawing all the elements in the same level of detail. If you have, for example, a shoe in the very foreground of the drawing and decide to draw the other shoe at the extreme back corner of that room, both of those shoes will be at the exact same size in your drawing, and as such, there are no background elements at all that would be fast to fill in with less detail. But I have to say that when you're doing design for a space, this can also be a great thing, because isometric view provides enough room for each item to be drawn in with as much design and detail as you want. If you, for example, hand over a scene like this to a 3D artist, they don't have to squint and guess what they're looking at when they want to see an element in the distance. My one hope with this illustration process is also to show someone out there that is watching this that it is possible to add so much story to a space if you allow some of that storytelling to come from the visual design process itself. I've been involved in so many projects where basically every story detail comes from a writer in a huge shopping list of items that need to be crammed into an illustration, and I've always felt like a lot of really good story elements died in those situations because there was no understanding of how a space can help tell its own story just through visual design. For pretty much any location design such as this, all you really need to know is who lives here and what this space is used for. When you focus on these questions with each item that you place in that scene, you'll find out that so many smaller stories that are super interesting suddenly become visible in a way that's at the same time more spontaneous and feel natural because they happen in that space. This illustration took a whole lot of time. It was fun to do, but at the same time it was also a lot of work. But I hope that this video can inspire you to design your own space, maybe your own house, in a way that tells your own story to all of us. I'm Mikko, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!